Hi everybody. In a different location. Sorry, it took me a second to log on. We were just recording an episode of Champagne Sharks, like literally right before I hopped on here. Um, but you guys had homework, and I wanted to talk about your homework. Hopefully, you guys are still awake. I know it's pretty late because last time I said I was gonna. Well, yesterday I said I was gonna be on today, but I didn't know what time because I was recording today. So, but I'm here now. And I really want us to talk about childhood trauma and understanding childhood trauma. I hopefully you guys watched the ACEs video, the TED Talk by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, where she talks about the adverse childhood experiences study and the ways in which. Sorry, I'm highly picky. Yeah, so the study basically is the study that shows that your experiences in childhood have a direct impact on your health as an adult, right? Both your physical and your mental health. So one of the things that I think is really important for Black people to think about is the ways in which trauma has affected our health also collectively, right? So collectively, we can also talk about the fact that we've been, through slavery, Jim Crow, all that stress, all that trauma, watching our people be hung from trees, white men able to rape white women with impunity, white women beating Black children to death, all that trauma on trauma and trauma. And nobody's ever told you that it has a direct impact on your biological health. No one has ever told you that this directly impacts your blood pressure, the fact that so many of us have diabetes, the fact that so many of us suffer from obesity and depression. Nobody tells you trauma is definitely correlated with that. And they love to tell you niggas can't eat. They love saying that shit, right? But they never tell you that there's a direct correlation. So I'm hoping you guys did your homework. Hopefully some people will hopefully someone will let me know if they did the homework. But yeah, so there's so many things about the ways that we're conditioned to believe about ourselves and our behavior, especially as Black people, that I believe have been problematic for us from day one. It's more than just whether or not it's more than just our eating. Because the reality is this, we're still at higher risk of blood pressure and most high blood pressure and heart disease and all that stuff, even in the absence of unhealthy or high risk behavior. So the other thing, I actually had to watch the ACEs video, the TED Talk. Hopefully you guys did that and you guys can have an understanding of how your health is impacted. So there's a few things. That fear response system that's constantly being activated in your childhood, that fear response system, what happens is shooting chemicals through your body, cortisol being one of those chemicals, and cortisol being extremely detrimental to your health if it stays in your system or if there's too much in your system. You need a certain amount of cortisol to get you up in the morning, you need a certain amount of cortisol to get you up throughout your day. And the levels are higher in the morning, and then drop at night. Or they start rising in the morning and drop at night, as a way for you to, have energy and go to sleep and all that good shit. Well, if that chemical stays in your system, it begins to become toxic. You guys have heard that term toxic? The term toxic actually means the stress hormones are becoming toxic to your body. It's a real thing, right? So the stress hormones begin to create diseases. For example, glucose is pumping through your system, makes your muscles stronger, when you're in fight or flight mode. So you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. You're in fight or flight mode. Your body says defend yourself or run. You got to be faster. You got to be stronger than normal. So it starts pumping chemicals so it can do that. But what happens when your glucose is starting to pump all through your system and it's not being absorbed? Because it's so much, it's just overrun because it's constantly stressed out. It's constantly feeling in fear. It's constantly feeling like that. And that system becomes overloaded. And eventually your liver starts producing the glucose. And then what? You become diabetic, right? So there's direct correlation between our experiences as children and our experiences of trauma and our health. I hope you guys had a chance to also watch the still face experiment video. We'll talk about that later if you guys actually watched it. And hopefully some other things we could talk about as well. Let's see. But yeah, so I hope that you guys kind of have somewhat of an understanding of it. One of the things that I talked about, I'm going to show you guys some slides, or some things I didn't actually get to. When I get to the different types of stress that exist and what that means. So I think I went over some of the slides before around like what kind of diseases and things are at higher risk. But I definitely want to get to the ways in which Black children in particular are at high risk. And we've kind of covered this one part. I'm going to get to it right now so you guys can see it. Again, I'm not as good at this as T is, so be patient. Share my screen here. Got it. Okay. Okay. So I talked about this, and I thought this was important to look at because, this is what most people think of when they think of childhood trauma and experiences. They mostly think about this here at the top, right? This things that are happening directly to them in the home. This is what most people focus on. However, if you look at the bottom, these are things that are structural. These are things that most people don't have control over, right? We look at things like poverty. Poverty is definitely traumatic and stressful for children as well, right? Discrimination is stressful. That's a part of systematic oppression as well. The fact that, our kids can't go to the store without being followed. The fact that as soon as our kids walk to the classroom, the teacher's got some shit to say to them, right? To discourage them. Community disruption. Something tragic happens in our community. Gentrification is definitely a big part of that as well. People just being removed from their homes, especially in Inglewood. That was a big thing in Inglewood, where the rent went up crazy because they were building a new stadium. The other thing is the fact that there's lack of opportunity, economic mobility, and social capital. That is traumatic and stressful for families, and definitely stressful for the children who are experiencing it. The same with poor housing quality and affordability. It affects us all, and violence, of course, right? Most people don't look at those things when we're talking about trauma that children are experiencing, because poverty, people are poor. We can't throw people in jail for people being poor, right? Or you can't throw people in jail because there are people who are poor. So the reality is that the economic situation that we're in is traumatizing to us, which is why I believe that a lot of these systems were created to continue to not only abuse us economically, but to also abuse us psychologically. So I really think for Black people, we have to be more, understanding of the fact that we are being traumatized daily, and it is affecting our health and our mental health. The other thing is it affects our relationships and our connection with each other. On the podcast, one of the things that we talked about was the whole situation with the store owner, and that's a restaurant owner that we talked about yesterday on the live yesterday. The restaurant owner who yelled in the middle of his restaurant because some girls were twerking, right? And one of the things in that conversation that Kenny and I were having was pointing out the fact that sometimes your approach affects how people respond, right? If you have a real connection, or you're trying to build connection in your community, there's a way you approach and you talk to people in order for them to hear that message, in order for them to understand that you can only do that when you have an understanding that this person clearly has whatever need it is that they have, and that we can help get that need met, whatever it is. But the way you approach is key. If you come in and put people on the defensive and you stress them out, you can't be surprised if they go into fight or flight mode, right? You can't be surprised at that. So the way you connect is by empathizing. Now, let's just say, I'll give you an example. One time I was working, I was with my mom at a restaurant. I talk about this in the podcast as well. I was with my mom at a restaurant. The server was rude, said something rude to us, because it was a misunderstanding between me and her, and then she got a little rude. Instead of me going off on her, which most people probably would say I was justified in doing, I said to myself, okay, what do I really want here? What's going to be the most effective outcome? I want to have a good meal with my family and enjoy it. And I'm sure she wants to continue with her job and enjoy her day. So instead of me flipping out on her, I paid attention to what she was experiencing. It was a very crowded day. It was very crowded. It was very busy. She was rushing around. People were asking for a lot of things. So when she came back to my desk, instead of me flipping to my table, instead of me flipping the fuck out on her, I said, I noticed that you're very busy. And I just wanted to make sure that, I wasn't trying to distract you. I was trying to get your attention. I didn't hear you. I wasn't sure if you heard me the first time. That's why I said it again. And so after I said that to her, but first thing is I acknowledged, I know you're busy. It's a busy day. I see you running around. When I did all that, defenses went completely down. She was cool. Oh man, and she apologized. I never apologized for whatever it was that she was mad at me about. But she apologized because she knew she didn't approach it the right way. At the end of the day, I could have got her fired. I could have did all these other things, but why do all that? So that this man's restaurant, for example, everybody's fighting to get this shit shut down. I mean, not everybody, but I see people trying or attempting to say, oh, we need to shut his place down and, he needs to lose his business and all that. Why? He didn't do anything egregious. But that's because we lack so much empathy and connection with each other, and we don't even realize that comes from our trauma. So we blame each other for this lack of unity and all this stuff. We've been traumatized so much, it makes connection damn near impossible in so many ways. I heard Dr. Stacey Patton say this, and I never forgot it. She said, we've only been able to be a family for the last 45 years. You can't be a family during slavery, not a healthy family. You can barely even you don't even have your own freedom. During Jim Crow, you're worried whether or not your partner is going to get hung from a tree. You're always in panic mode. You don't get the chance to actually nurture your children, nurture your relationships. You don't even have that opportunity. So it's very different for us. Our trauma is very different. And we have to acknowledge the fact that our trauma is impacting the way in which we interact. I see you guys in the chat room. Shout out to Harlow. Shout out to Huey Freeman. Shout out to Ledledge. I hope I said that right. Is it Ledledge? Did any of you guys watch the ACEs video? Because I really want to know what you guys thought. If anybody watched the ACEs video, the TED Talk, or the still face experiment video, I would love to get your thoughts on that and what you guys, how you guys felt after watching it. I didn't feel like it was. I don't think I can show it on here because it's already on YouTube. And I don't want to get it shut down or some shit. So yeah. So if you got the chance to watch the video, just put it in the chat, and I'd love to discuss it with you guys. If you haven't watched it, try to watch it when you get a chance. So the other thing I wanted to also address the fact that we have to understand that even our relationships with each other are impacted by our trauma, right? Even the ways our relationships look, the way that we talk to our partner, the way that we assume things are supposed to happen in our relationships, we have so many conversations about realizing that you have an attachment issue. So your trauma and your experience with your family has made it difficult for you in your relationships moving forward, and you didn't even know it. And Black people, a lot of us have experienced, not because our parents were fucked up, not because they were doing the best they could with what they had. A lot of us have never seen a healthy relationship. We don't know what that shit even fucking looks like, right? So a lot of times we assume that we're supposed to fit into this mold that white people fit into, as far as how their relationships look. We assume so the way TV or movies have told us relationships and marriages should look, for some reason we've adapted that. We think that's supposed to be us. But a lot of that shit's not realistic for us because we don't have the same circumstances. How can we have the same situation? We've had so much trauma, we don't even know how to connect with each other. I look at a lot of the conversation with these gender wars. I look at a lot of these gender wars on Twitter and shit, and I'm always surprised how much people lack connection. Everybody's looking for fault and blame. So you ever see those hypothetical scenarios in these stories? It's like, you know, who was right, the man or the woman in this situation? Who is right, the stepmom or the mom, right? It's always those kind of, you know, dichotomies in a way, right? Or binaries, right? I always have this alternative perspective, which is not about who's right or wrong. Because honestly, everyone in their mind is right. Everyone in their mind, their perspective is justified. Everyone feels like their feelings are very valid and others are not. So what we're looking at then is the connection. It's not about me being right or wrong. It's not about whether or not your partner was right. Is my partner hurt right now? You know, maybe I was, maybe you weren't doing anything when you were talking at the bar with this girl and your girlfriend walked in on you. Maybe, you know, you're not wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't kiss the girl, but your girlfriend's upset. She storms out of the bar. She yells at you and storms out of the bar. Yeah, she shouldn't have yelled at you. You didn't do anything wrong. You could fight about how right you are and how you didn't do anything wrong and she's crazy. Or you can say, you know, I understand that hurt you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I hear you. I would like to explain my position. This is what was happening. You'd be surprised. People usually calm down and they can hear you a lot better. Oh, I'm sorry. Because we have to have that patience for each other. We've been through so much trauma. We don't know how not to be reactionary half the time. Someone watched the still face video. Harlow, the still face video was interesting. I didn't know kids that young read and pay attention that much to our faces. Absolutely. So that's what I wanted you guys to pick up on. Babies pick up and sense all that shit. Their brains are constantly looking to learn and develop. So the primary caregivers are literally shaping the brain and the way that their child will think, right? It also shapes the way in which they interact in relationships in the future. What's interesting to watch the still face experiment, the baby gets upset when the mom stops playing with them or looking at them, right? And they always start crying and screeching and want the attention. And I always point out to people, I said, the thing about this is a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. So nobody says, oh my God, look at that baby throwing a tantrum. Look at that baby. Look at how shameful that is. That baby's throwing a tantrum. Oh my God, that mother's just gonna take that. Nobody's, because it's a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, right? But a lot of times, older kids have similar behaviors. They just might not be screaming and crying, but they do things to get your attention. So what does that behavior look like when they're 4 or 5 or 7 or 10 or 15? It might not be crying and screaming. It might not be throwing a quote unquote tantrum, but sometimes they engage in behaviors that you might not like in order for them to get your attention. Because attention is a neurological, biological human need. I think I've told you guys that before. Yeah. And kids pay attention to everything. Babies are extremely connected to their parents. This is why, you guys ever heard that her parents say things, or older people say things like, let the baby cry it out, leave the baby in there. If you hold them too much, they'll get spoiled. They're just crying to get your attention. They're just crying. They just want you to hold them. You can't spoil them. All that shit's wrong advice. In fact, it's dangerous advice and causes more problems. It causes more disconnection. When your baby is crying, you pick up your baby. You hold your baby. That is not, no, you don't just let your baby cry it out. That actually increases their stress. That gets to the topic. That stress affects them as they get older. The lack of hugging and kissing also affects the way that they interact. So they feel like, okay, I can't rely on the people around me to get my needs met. This is what happens. I can't rely on the people around me to get my needs met. So as they grow older, they learn how to get their own needs met. They get into relationships and they can't connect because they only know how to get their own needs met. They don't know how to get other people's needs met. They don't know how to wait for someone to support them. They just take care of themselves and that's it. The problem with that is they don't trust people. They grew up in a relationship with their parents that wasn't full of trust. They felt dismissed. How many times do people dismiss their children? If you think about that still face experiment video, Think about how many times we've seen parents dismiss their children. I'm busy right now. I often recommend that parents actually turn to the child and explain to them as much. Now, granted, the smaller the child, and some children are just way more attached. It might take a few times, but it's way better than pretending like you don't care, because you do care. We just don't, just not focus at that moment on that, but you have to let them know, because that is going to impact their health, their ability to know what connection is and what relationship looks like. I often share my story about how I was raised by a narcissist, an abusive narcissist. And because I was raised by an abusive narcissist, I did not know what an abusive narcissistic relationship looked like. Because I didn't know that's what I was in. I didn't know that's what it was. It was just a relationship. It was just normal. It's normal to me, at least at the time, for someone to basically tell you everything to do, right? It's normal to me to constantly look to appease the narcissist. That's all I've ever known. Because as a kid, all I knew was to try to appease my dad. Why? Because that's the only way I could keep safe. So that's the other thing we have to remember with children. A lot of times they begin to develop habits and behaviors, and a lot of us have done it, and none of us have them. We develop those coping mechanisms and ways to deal with things, or the way that we respond to things is based off of how our brains are triggered because we've experienced this as a kid, or we experienced this growing up. So for me, my response to narcissism is to appease, which is very common for women. Women actually have a fourth survival response. You guys know fight, flight, and freeze. Women have also appease, right? So appease is when you try to keep yourself safe by befriending the danger or your abuser. Our bodies literally flood with oxytocin, which is the love chemical. That's the chemical that bonds parents with their children. Your body floods with the oxytocin hormone, and you become more chemically bonded with your abuser. So your only goal is to try to keep yourself safe. So I grew up knowing, okay, try not to get in too much trouble at school. Although my dad wasn't really big on like making sure my homework was done or whatever, I just knew not to get in too much trouble at school, right? I knew he liked me going to church. I knew he liked me being a super Christian. I knew not to go certain places, do certain things. I just figured out what things were that made him happy. I knew not to have certain things on the television when he came home. You begin to pick up this habit. So I always thought that is a relationship. So I get into a relationship with narcissists, not realizing that's what I'm in, because it's normal. Because relationships look like. You're supposed to appease the man or appease the person that you're with. That's your job. So if you guys did the homework, I see you guys saying you did the homework. Please let us know what you thought of the videos, because I really want your insight. Because most of what I'm talking about is going to be piggybacking off what you guys are saying, what you guys are asking me, and that's why I did that. That's why I emphasized the homework like a bunch of times. And all the lives I was on, even the live the T was on, I made sure you guys knew that you guys had to watch those videos. So definitely, please, comment if you watch the videos. Let me give a shout out to everybody in the chat. We got hello. I don't know what this has to do with liberals and liberalism. That will end all problems in America, simple and easy. It's not that simple or easy, but shout out to you. Hi. Startup Brian, shout out to you. Shout out to Huey. Oh, I already shout out to y'all, Huey Freeman. But another shout out to you because you're special. SBN29 on Periscope, shout out to you. Let's see. Shout out to Colonel COVID Gaddafi. Shout out to you. That's my buddy on Twitter. Yeah, so what else is it here? That's it. Oh, Island Bowie. I think I said that right. And I Am Restored 77. Hi, I Am Restored. Welcome. I'm glad you're here with us. So yeah, so you guys who watched it, I definitely want you guys to comment in the chat. I have a question here. How did you end up figuring out you had the appeasement issue? I didn't until I started studying about trauma. So I became a trauma-informed care educator, honestly, kind of by a fluke. I was at a party running my mouth, and somebody thought, "Oh my God!" I studied a lot of this shit for years. So I work with children, so I've always studied and learned about shit. But then I started learning more about trauma and its impact, because I was going through a deep dark depression. And I was going through a lot of shit, like a lot of shit. So what I did was I said, I just couldn't take it anymore. I have to do something. So I started researching and learning about trauma. And I started reading books like The Body Keeps the Score. And I read Trauma and Recovery by Judith L. Herman, Childhood Disrupted, all these books I read about it. And that's when I learned that the appeasement was my survival response. But first I had to learn I was being abused. That's number one. My dad was very physically, emotionally, and psychologically abusive. When I say psychologically abusive, that is one of the most toughest things. I still have to undo shit that he did in my head, right? So in order for me to survive in that environment, I developed certain habits and coping mechanisms. And one of them is to appease, right? Now, to also add to that, trauma also can sometimes, often does, provide you with what I call superpowers. If you think about like most superheroes, right? Most superheroes are born out of some sort of trauma. Something crashes, they get bit by something explodes, they're, whatever. A lot of the times it's some sort of trauma, right? Where this superpower emerges. With trauma, we also develop certain skill sets because our brain had to learn how to survive in these environments, right? So for example, if my dad would come home, and I was at home, I would often like tense up and then watch. I had to look at his face. Which dad was I getting today? Was I getting the dad that's gonna come home with boxes of donuts, or was I gonna get the dad that was gonna punch me in the mouth because I didn't wash the dishes the right way, right? So which dad was I gonna get that day? So I had to learn how to read body language, understand tone, and I had to learn how to understand facial expressions. Now, because as a child, that's all I knew how to do, and I had to learn it. Now, as an adult, it's a skill set. Most of my jobs, I work in the community. Most of my jobs, I'm working with people directly, right? Even when I'm training, before COVID, I was working with people directly, training in person. The ability to be able to read facial expressions and body language and tone is what helps me interact with my classes. That's why even doing online is really difficult for me because I don't get the same type of feedback that I would get if I'm looking at your body language and I'm looking at your facial expressions. My point is that's a skill set that I had developed as a result of my trauma. So I often like to look at what skills, what talents, whatever did I develop out of this situation? That's how our brains work. Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. Oh, you said I never knew appeasement was a thing, but it makes sense, right? It makes total sense. We have to understand that almost all of our habits come from something. That's why we have to be more patient with each other, especially as Black people. We have to be more patient with each other. Nails look nice, by the way. Oh, thank you. And they sparkle a little bit, if you guys can see. I love getting my nails done. It's like my thing. I have to. It's like my self-care. It's like I have to get my nails done. Let me see. Have you had autistic parents in your course? I know people on the spectrum. Yes, actually, can have problems reading body language. Yes. I actually had people who were on the spectrum in my class. But actually, both parents were autistic. They were a couple. And sometimes it was a challenge because in a class with a group of people, other people might not know that's what they're looking at. And so they become very impatient. I had to learn to just listen and let them say what it is they were saying, and then try my best to be verbal. Because some people, so I think with them, they were more verbal. They weren't really into my expressions and my tones. They needed me to be very clear in what I was saying. So that was, so I've definitely had that in my class. And I like working with everybody. So all people pretty much I love working with. I love working with Black people specifically. But in general, I love working with all types of groups. I worked at a domestic violence shelter. That's also where I taught a parenting class there. And that's also where I had to really push the point around appeasement. Because a lot of times people don't realize that the reason why women don't leave those relationships is because their bodies are flooded with oxytocin and they're bonded. That's now their abuser that they love, that they want to protect, that they want to be connected to, Yeah, so I definitely want us to be more patient with each other because we have so much trauma. I see that we don't have a lot of patience with each other, right? We're very reactionary. What I mean by that is, how many times have you grown up and you've either witnessed this from someone's mother or your own mother, your own parent, where they seem to snap real quick for no reason? It seems like no reason, but they have a reason. How many times have we seen parents flip out over something small, really small? I've seen parents flip out on their kids for knocking something over. I was in a waiting room. So a little girl, she had a little cup or some shit with some soda juice or some shit in it. She was playing around and she knocked over the cup. But baby couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. Mother flips the fuck out. It's just a little bit of juice. They got a mop. It's a waiting room at a doctor's office. There's a fucking mop somewhere. You'll be fine. But she's flipping the fuck out. In the moment, it's easy to judge and say, well, oh, this mother is horrible. We also don't know what that mother's been through. We don't know how her own parents might have reacted when she dropped or broke something or spilled something, right? We don't understand how that impacts the way that we parent, the way that we're in relationships, the way we connect with each other just on a regular basis, right? So to me, it's extremely important that we have an understanding of trauma so we can understand ourselves and understand the people around us. I wasn't planning to be on here long, so don't worry, it's gonna be a long one because I have to get back home. Because I guess I just I got off work, recorded, and came to do this. I promised you guys I would come back here and talk about it. But you guys haven't told me much of what you guys saw, so I'm not sure what to respond to. But I do want to point out that when we talk about health and we talk about ourselves, we have to understand the ways that we've been impacted and the ways that our behavior has been impacted. Being reactionary is going to fight or flight mode. We go to survival response mode. Your survival response, in fact, I think I have I do. Y'all, I think y'all are gonna like this when I do. I think y'all might like this. I might get in some trouble for it, so don't tell nobody. Don't share this video and get me in trouble. This isn't really, I don't know who created this diagram. So I'm gonna show you guys something and hopefully you guys, so I'm gonna show you guys a picture of the brain. So I can explain the survival response shit a lot better. Okay, hopefully you guys can see it. I'm not always sure what you guys can see. I have it. Hopefully you guys can see it okay. Yeah, you guys got it. So if you look at, I've not talked about this before, the brain and the different parts of the brain. So this reptilian part of your brain, now this is the triune brain. This isn't the only diagram of the brain. There are multiple parts of the brain. This is just a very, very overly simplistic brain. Okay, so I'm giving you the bare basics. So there's so many other intricate parts of this. Please don't think that I'm giving you some bullshit because I just understand this is very, very basic. This orange part is your reptilian brain. That's your survival part of your brain. You consider things like eat, sleep, poop. What does a reptile do? Think about the things reptiles do. Just think to yourself, what do you know, things you know lizards do? They run, they mate, they sleep, they basic necessities. All the things that you need to survive right here, right? Okay, that's also where your fight, flight, and freeze part of your brain is. Fight, flight, and freeze. This is when you're born, this part of your brain is already online. And you pretty much operate in this majority of this in your brain until about the age of 2 years old. You're pretty much operating in survival mode until about 2 years old. Then around 2, 3 years old, this limbic system comes online. That's the emotional part of your brain. It's a lot of empathy, connection. They feel things really strongly at that age. I'm sure you guys have heard the term terrible two. You know, that's when you tell a kid no at the grocery store and they kick and scream, ah, you know, that's terrible too, right? They want to run around and grab everything. All of that is normal. First of all, your child throwing a tantrum is perfectly normal. They're upset. And you think it's just a no, They felt that no very, very strongly because that's the part of the brain that they're in. That's they pretty much are operating this part of their brain with spurts of other parts until about the age 10 years old, 10, 11 years old. Then the neocortex, that's this blue part, that begins to come online. The thing about this part is this is where impulse control is. This is where critical thinking is, analytical thinking. All that is here in the neocortex. The ability to learn, interpret things, all that's here, right? This, like I said, doesn't even come online until about 10 years old. So that's why your 6-year-old, after you told them 100 times not to do something, they did it anyway, because the impulse control just isn't there. And remember, every child is different in their development, right? It's not like on their 10th birthday, the limbic system pops up, because that's not how that works, right? But this to me is important to know because you have to know how your brain works. Now, there's also another part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is where your long-term thinking and planning are. This comes online around the age of 15 years old. If you think about it, that makes sense. That's usually the time we start to have kids looking at college and all that shit, right? Because this other part ain't gonna do all that. They're not thinking long-term yet. They might have some ideas. They might say, oh, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. But be able to plan that, a little bit difficult, right? At least on their own. Now, the thing about when you are afraid or something, or you feel like you're in danger, guess what goes offline first? This neocortex. So your ability to think and plan when you're afraid shuts down. I always use my hand as an example. So if you look at this as your brain, the neocortex goes offline when you're afraid. Next part that goes offline, your limbic system. Then you're operating in fight, flight, freeze mode. You are operating in survival mode. So when you get afraid or angry, anger is literally just hurt or fear. So if you're angry at someone, you're either hurt or you're afraid of something. Your brain is taking your neocortex offline, taking that limbic system offline, and taking that survival mode and making it the brain. Like this is what you're going to be operating out of. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. You definitely want to have that system working well, right? Now, this is when it becomes a problem. You aren't really in danger, right? But you're angry, you're upset. It goes offline. You get upset and you don't have the ability to empathize or connect. In operating survival mode, you start fighting or fleeing, whether emotionally or physically. And you don't have access to the ability to be rational. You ever talk to somebody who's so angry, like yelling and screaming and shit, and you're like, okay, there's a misunderstanding. Here's the truth. Here's the information that you need. And you're thinking this information that clarifies everything should calm this person down, and it don't. You know why? They're still upset. They didn't even hear a damn thing you said. They don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. They still mad. And the reason why they're still mad is because that part of their brain hasn't come back online. So another example I often give when I talk about children, I might have done it on the live before, I'm not sure. But I often use this example of, you live in an apartment with your kid, you're a 3-year-old, maybe you have some guests that are getting ready to come over later. And your child, you look up and you see your child has drawn all over your wall. Right? Now, you don't even realize it, but your brain goes into fight or flight mode. You start operating out of your survival part of your brain. What's going on? So your brain's trigger, your amygdala is going off, like a little alarm system in your brain. The amygdala goes off saying, whoop, whoop, danger, danger. Guess what? Your ability to analyze and plan go offline, right? Your limbic system, that empathy and connection and shit, goes offline. Think about like a mammal. It's also called the mammalian brain. If you think about what puppies do that lizards don't do, like puppies can, hug you, they cry, they have, all that. That's why it's called the mammalian brain, right? So your ability to connect with your child, offline. In fact, you forget you love your child. It's because as the kids say, they flip their lid. That's what my kids would say when I teach them the brain. They flip their lid. Yeah, they flip their lid. And so they're operating in survival mode. So you yell, you scream, you beat your child because that part of your brain isn't even online. That part of your brain isn't even online. Now, why? Because you didn't realize, but your brain saw your child as a threat to their need, to your needs. What needs could I be talking about? Okay, you live in an apartment. Your child just drew on the wall. Am I gonna get my deposit back? I gotta get another place. I can't afford to fix this. The need there was stability. The need for stability was a threat. The child was a threat to your need for stability, right? Which is a biological, neurological need. You love that wall, you decorated beautifully because beauty is a need. And now your child just ruined it. They were a threat to your need. You don't even know this is happening in your brain and body. You're operating in survival mode because you don't even realize it, right? Yes, the brain is something, Carlo. This is why I always say if we understand the brain and the body better, we'd have so much more understanding of ourselves and other people. I'm a strong believer in that. I see a lot of things here in the comments. Let's see. Carlo, you're killing it in the chat. It seems harder, especially for older people, to talk about trauma, at least in my family anyway. It's really difficult, especially when you don't know what to do about it. Like my mom she only recently started really talking about it. My mother's been through some shit, okay? Been through some shit. It also gave me a lot of patience for her temper growing up. But she's been through some shit. So it's hard because it's like, okay, I have this trauma. What do I do about it now? Like, what's the point? I'm already old now. I am who I am. Also, it wasn't really a conversation growing up. You just had to survive. We pretty much, as Black people, operate completely in survival mode all the time. That's why we get reactionary with things. We just flip out on shit. I'm not mad at it. Sometimes it's justified. But a lot of times because we're operating in that survival mode. We know how to survive. That's one thing we know how to do. Silent right now because I'm trying to understand and catch up what appeasement is. So appeasement is basically when you're trying to make sure that the person that's in front of you is happy with you. So that way they don't hurt you, right? So appeasing would be something like making sure that your partner always has everything that they want, even if it's not something that you want to do, even if it's not something that you think you should do. For the most part, it's you just trying to make them happy. It's usually against yourself, but to make them happy because you think that's going to keep you safe. That's what appeasement is. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, I think Carla has something else. Oh, what's the best way to deal with someone when their brain shuts off like that then? Walk away? No. No, definitely not. De-escalation is usually the way I do it. So I'm a professional de-escalator essentially, right? I worked in social services for years. So most of the kids that I've worked with were high trauma, had a lot of trauma. So I was a caseworker, I was a wraparound supervisor, all these things, right? So I would work with these kids and sometimes they flip the fuck out for whatever reason. They think I'm a social worker, they mad about what their foster mom did or the group home did, then they just start flipping out, right? But sometimes I think they see me as a threat because they think I'm a social worker. And social workers are the people that took them from their parents in the first place or move them around all the time or don't believe them when they tell them things happen, right? I represent that even though I was never a social worker. But they don't know that. They just see a person that walks in their house, ask them a bunch of questions. I was actually there to help them. But see, the survival part of their brain goes, you're a threat. You might make me move. You might do this. You might do that. You might shame me and dismiss my feelings. No, fuck you. And they shut down. They kick and they scream. They might yell at me. I've had kids swing on me. I've had kids try to spit on me. I've had kids try to throw shit at me. The last thing I would do is walk away. The reason now, if I'm in danger, I make sure I keep myself safe. That's different. Always keep yourself safe. I will block or move or whatever I got to do. I do what I got to do. But if you walk away, it just makes them more upset. So what I always do is I try to hear them. Let them yell and scream. Try to hear what's underneath. What are they really trying to tell you? Remember I told you anger is either fear or hurt. What's hurting them and what are they afraid of? Do they need reassurance? Right? Me walking in, they're afraid. So once I let them yell and I scream, I say, yeah, You know, they used to tell me, you know, you gotta take me this, you're gonna do that. And I said, yeah, and I can understand how that can piss you off. Definitely. That's upsetting me too. And then what happened? So before that, the other worker did what to you? You know, they going off. But the fact that I'm empathizing, the fact that I'm listening to them, they usually calm down. They really just want to be heard most of the time. Most people, when they're upset, they just feel like you didn't hear them. That's why they're yelling. Now, if you're in a dangerous situation, protect yourself. Safety always comes first. So never think I'm saying sit up there and get your ass beat. That is not what I'm saying. Or nor am I saying take abuse. You have to hold the boundaries, hold up your boundaries. You know, if I felt like a kid was going too far, I might have to say, okay, I have to keep myself safe. You got to give me a call. You know, whatever. If I have to do that, I have to do that. But it's never just abruptly walking away. Never, never, never. I see something. Oh, pretty much my entire Twitter, me working out my insecurity over being told I need to be like every older woman who raised me is ideal. This is a thing. There's so many things you're gonna have to work through from whatever you were raised to believe about yourself and others. You have to, like, that's the toughest part, is be able to figure out who the fuck you are, you know? So yeah. I'm glad it was useful for you, Harlow. I always, you know, empathy is the key thing. You know, let me show you something. I don't know if I showed you guys this last time, but I want to show you, where is it? It's a universal basic human needs. If I could pull that up. I used to have a whole slide on that, but I can't seem to look at that slide or a handout on it. So this is from the Center for Nonviolent Communication. I want you guys to see this. So this is a list of just basic human needs. This is how you learn that. And this one, I teach you guys a trick on how to empathize with people. Okay, hopefully you guys are still following me. So I want you guys to see this. It's a list. It's called a needs inventory. But these are really basic human needs, right? So these are things that we don't even realize are human needs. So connection, things like acceptance, affection, appreciation, belonging. You want to feel like you belong. If you don't feel like in your own family, if you feel like an outsider in your family, that's harmful. That makes you feel bad, right? It's traumatic for you. Cooperation, not compliance. Cooperation. You need to literally cooperate with others. Communication is a human need. Closeness is a human need. Community, companionship, compassion, consideration, consistency, empathy, inclusion, intimacy, love, mutuality, nurturing, respect, self-respect, safety, security, stability, support, to know and be known. You like to understand things. To see and be seen, to understand and be understood. Trust, warmth, physical well-being, such as air, food, of course, movement, exercise, rest, sex, safety, shelter, all these things, right? Remember I said beauty is a need? It's right here, peace. In order for you to be at peace, you need beauty, communion, basically community, ease, equality, harmony. You need things to be working well and peacefully. Inspiration, you need to feel inspired. That's why we get depressed when we don't, right? Our autonomy is important, our ability to make choices. That's a tough one for a lot of parents because most parents don't want to give kids choices. Choice is literally a biological human need. I often teach parents how to give kids choice within limits. So do you want to wear the green shirt or the blue shirt? You know, that's usually one of the tricks I use. But as you guys can see, there's a lot of needs here. And these aren't the only needs. These are just the ones that they listed. These are things your brain needs in order to feel connected, to feel healthy, to feel safe. That's something that I hope a lot of people begin to take heed to. So the trick is, I'm gonna go back to the list actually. So the trick is, when you're listening to people and you want to de-escalate them and you want to connect with them, you listen for these needs underneath. So they're telling you, they're upset because They had a long day. They went to work. They're tired of the fact that they came home and you guys didn't wash the dishes and take the trash out. I didn't eat breakfast. I missed breakfast this morning. I worked all day. My boss was yelling at me. I didn't even know if I did the thing right. I'm really nervous about the fact that these people might fire me. And then I come home, I sit through traffic. I try to get this done, and I can't get all my errands done. I come home, and all I asked you to do was take the chicken out the freezer, wash the dishes, and take out the trash. That's all you had to do. Now, now I'm going off. What needs did you hear underneath that? Well, let's look at the list. Let's see what needs we heard. There was a need for stability because, hey, I might be feel like I'm gonna lose my job. I think I also said I didn't eat, so my need for food wasn't met, right? My need for stability, that is under threat, right? My need for peace. I was sitting at work stressed out. I didn't feel understood by my boss. All this, I didn't feel considered. My boss yelling at me about some shit. There was no consideration for me there. I didn't feel like there was any understanding there. I don't feel secure at this job. I don't feel secure emotionally with her yelling at me, right? So when you listen to people tell these stories, see if you can identify what needs are, even if they're yelling at you, what are they really trying to tell me? What need was under threat for them? What need was under threat for them? And I think if you consider those things and you listen to those things and you pick out those things, you can help de-escalate people. I notice affection and intimacy is considered a human need. So is that why incels can get so fucking crazy? Because an essential need isn't being met? Yeah, and sex is also on that list if you notice. Sex is a human need, of course. But yeah, affection and intimacy is considered a human need. It's not just considered. You literally lose your mind without it. If you don't get affection, it really affects your brain and how you think, their ability to even connect at all. Intimacy is definitely important. You have to feel close with someone. You have to feel like you can confide in someone. That's also a part of safety. It's connection, but it's also a part of emotional safety and security. So incels can get crazy. A lot of times incels have trauma, and usually at the hands of their mother. So that's one of the things that I was going to be interesting, is that there's usually a trauma associated with why people have the outlook they have about the opposite sex or about themselves. It's what their experiences have been growing up. Yeah, I tried to use every Black kid's mom as an example because I'm talking to Black folk mostly. At least I believe I am. Oh my. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for sharing. Hopefully, you'll get that need met soon. Yeah. So at any rate, if we have an understanding of what the basic human needs are, it also helps us understand ourselves. So there's another thing we call the beneficial regret. Beneficial regret is basically taking something that you did that you feel bad about, something that maybe you yelled at your kid, or maybe you didn't do something you wanted to do, whatever it is, right? Instead of going directly to shame and blame, I'll give you 5 minutes. Don't you want to blame and shame it for 5 minutes? But we often go back to shame and blame, and we blame ourselves and we shame ourselves. And guess what? That's not accountability. Don't mistake it for accountability, because it's not. People think that shaming someone and them feeling bad means that there's accountability there. That's not what accountability is. We'll get into that in a second. But shame and blame is debilitating. It doesn't help you correct the situation. It doesn't help you address the situation. So if you are experiencing that you regret, think about what your body, I always say, what your body wants to learn. What did you learn from the situation? What did you glean from the situation? Right? Okay, what could I do better next time if I'm faced with the situation? And then you move the fuck on. If you sit in that shame and blame, you'll never address or correct your problem. In fact, you'll probably keep doing the same shit over and over and over again and then feel bad about it over and over and over again and never change. Yeah, so it's definitely important to address your needs. Your needs are a very your needs are very important. They affect how you behave, they affect how you react, they affect almost everything. How many times have you had do you go to work and snap at your coworker and turns out you not because your Susie asked for the stapler. This bitch is always asking for my goddamn stapler. Why don't she ever bring her fucking supplies? You sit at your desk pissed the fuck off because Susie asked to use your stapler. Now, if you had ate last night, if you had slept last night and ate this morning, maybe you wouldn't have snapped at poor little old Susie who wanted to borrow your stapler. She was having a rough morning, right? You're afraid your boyfriend or girlfriend or your husband or wife might leave you. And you at work, cussing out your coworker. And we get mad at people who do things like that, but not realizing most of us do that shit. You do it too. You get mad at people who do it, and we do the shit. Most of us do that shit. Because we don't realize we don't realize that's what's happening when it's happening. We don't realize that, oh, this is me feeling like my needs are under threat. Right? We don't even think of it that way. Which is why I say if you really want to connect with people, you have to understand their needs. The same thing with children. If you want children to listen to you and hold and be able to not lie to you all the time, you have to also hold yourself accountable when you do things wrong. Accountability is big. I'm a strong believer you can really only hold yourself accountable. But in order for people to learn how to do that, their parents have to have taught them. Like, you have to be an example of that. How do you become someone who is understanding and connected from your parents, right? From the people that connected with you. So the way in which you interact with your child will impact how they interact later as well, but it also impacts how they interact with you. Do you want to know why they're 15 and 16 and cussing your ass out and running out the house? You didn't realize you've been dismissing them and their feelings since they were fucking born and didn't even know it. They don't feel connected to you. They don't hear you. What is this? Beneficial regret is that like when you bust after messing with a girl you're not really into and you ask yourself, why are you in a situation? Yeah. Funny, you being funny, and I know you being funny, but to be real, that's pretty deep. When people who fuck with they're not really into, and then they regret it later, there's a problem there. And chances are it's probably a problem with intimacy. So that's actually, so yes, that is, so beneficial regret is essentially where you take that situation and you say, well, what can I do differently? Why did I put myself in this situation? Why was I even talking to this girl knowing I didn't like her? Was that she was giving me attention and I really wanted attention? Is it that she cooks good and I'll be hungry as fuck? You know? Is it that I feel like I have to appease people? She clearly was into me and I don't want to turn her down. I don't want to hurt her feelings. Right? So when you start to look at why you did something, instead of looking back and regretting it, you go, okay, what can I do differently next time? You know I have a thing about connection or attention. I know I like attention, but let me constantly tell myself when a girl's giving me attention, I don't have to give her the dick. You know? So I know like I said, I know you're being funny, but real shit. Shout out to Walter. Walter, thank you for joining. I realized I was a child. I was raised to react to tense situations the way you're supposed to react in prison. So I'm gonna guess, I don't know, I'm just guessing, that maybe someone in your household was incarcerated, or one of your parents had been incarcerated at some point, or they were raised by people who were incarcerated. Sometimes even if your parent wasn't the one that had the trauma, they learn the behaviors of their parents who did have the trauma. Because trauma is passed down both socially and genetically. Epigenetics, if you want to know what that is. So if you guys can Google epigenetics, it's literally the way your DNA is altered through trauma and experiences, right? So trauma is literally passed on through your DNA as well. Like they told me before, you think about whether someone cut you in line by accident or you're supposed to steal on them. Exactly. That's actually a really good example. Thank you for that. So that's actually a really, really good example, because think about kids in school, right? They're in lines all the time. At least they used to be. When I was a kid, kids were in lines all the time, right? And so the thing about being in lines is for some kids, they get a little tense being in those lines. And if you're raised by parents who are or raised in a household where, you know, it was kind of practice for you to like defend your position, you defend yourself at all costs all the time. A kid cuts you in line, you're probably gonna flip the fuck out. Because as far as you know, are concerned, this was a sort of threat. This person's disrespecting you. One thing about Black people, we hate being disrespected. That's like the number one. Respect is like super important on our list as Black people, right? For some people, some groups of people, it's honor. For some people, it's family and, you know, close family. For Black people, it's about respect. We love some respect. So we feel like we're being disrespected, we tend to react in ways to defend our position. Again, go into survival mode. So what you're talking about, Walter, is how you have to stop yourself before you get to that spot, before you get to the survival part of your brain, as we talked about earlier. Before you get to that survival part of your brain, you are able to get, while you're in this part, your neocortex, you're able to think. You say, okay, let me stop and think. I see this. I see what's happening. I know what I'm looking at. Okay, let me think. And you were able to either stop yourself, or maybe you weren't able to stop yourself, right? But the reality is, you've learned at least that there's an issue and what kind of behavior you have and why you have that behavior. So the times maybe you flipped out before or stole off on somebody who cut you and maybe got in some trouble and regretted what happened, I don't know. But somewhere along the line, you realize this probably wasn't the best way to react to things, right? We have to realize and find those things like that, little things like that. Like me, I get mad at people who come in the house. When I had a roommate, I would flip out. I would just, my body would literally go into fear mode. So I would be so upset that she came home. Not that she was even talking to me. We lived on two different sides of the house. She'd walk right past me. She had to say hi to me. My door would be closed, you know. But some reason, every time I heard the door open and close, I would tense up and get upset. Because my brain and body just had a habit of doing it, because that's what I did growing up. My dad would come home, I'd tense up and get upset, right? I'm sorry, did I click the right thing? Plenty of people in my family it's like they prep you for the worst possible outcome. Yeah, so if you have many people in your family that have been incarcerated, then you're talking about people who are traumatized, because prisons are the most disgusting, worst places on earth. And it does not help people or rehabilitate people, nor does it keep people safe at all, not even a little bit. So think about, you know, they've had to develop certain habits and behaviors, and now you've inherited them, even if you hadn't been incarcerated or had their experiences. You know, it's called social learning theory, right? Dr. Joy DeGruy talks a lot about this. She has a video on here that I recommend you guys look at if you hadn't already watched it, about post-traumatic slave syndromes. The one she does in London is like an hour and 21 minutes. You can tell I watch it a lot because I know all the details about it. It's one with the blue black background. She talks about the social learning theory, and she talks about how basically whatever your parents did, you're probably going to do, or the way that they behaved to things, you're probably going to behave, right? So your mother went through the trauma, and now because of that trauma, she's hyperreactive, she's overwhelmed, she's stressed out, she struggles with connection, all those things, right? And now you develop those habits. You're anxious, you struggle with connection, you flip out over small things, you're reactive, all these things, because that's just what behavior is. That's just what you're supposed to do. You all learn from the people around you. As you get older, you learn from people around you, the adults around you. How much of trauma is actually passed through DNA as opposed to the way the traumatized parent teaches the child? I don't know if there's a measuring tool for that. I don't know, how do I measure that? I don't even know, like, what would I say? As far as I really wouldn't know how to even answer that. Like, how much? I don't know. Like, how do you measure trauma and how much is passed down, because the trauma is, and it varies on situations and people. That could be part of it. But both actually happen. So social learning is consistent, and it's not even just like the way the traumatized parent teaches the child. It's really the way the traumatized parent interacts with the child and anyone around them, right? So if you have a parent that is typically rude to servers, you might think it's normal to be rude to servers, right? Because that's just that was just normal behavior. You don't even think anything of it. It's just who you are and what you do. I bet you guys can think of like a ton of habits you might have that you got from your parents. Yeah, we have a thing about respect. That's a big thing. And I get it. There's another Dr. Joy DeGruy lecture. She talks about respect meaning to see, and read meaning again. So basically to see again, to look again, right? I always think that was interesting. We like for people to see us and respect us. The thing about being disrespected, you feel like you're being dismissed. You and your needs are being dismissed. So with respect, you're being seen and you're not being dismissed. Yeah. So you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and end this. I was only planning to be on here an hour anyway. Like I said, I had to drive back to my house in real LA. I'm in the Valley right now. Valley sucks. But thank you all for joining me. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to hit me up. I'm on Twitter at Lifestar Media. You can also find me on the Champagne Sharks Twitter. So please follow us on Champagne Sharks on everything. Just Google Champagne Sharks. Don't forget to subscribe on Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We need this. And share. Like, subscribe, and share. It's really, really important. So as you guys, continue throughout your week and through your weekend, I want you guys to really consider and think about empathy and identifying people's needs. If you would like a link, what if I can post a link? Can I post a link? I could just give you guys the link to the needs inventory. And I want you guys to actually practice this. So that's your next homework. Your homework assignment now is to practice identifying needs in the people that you talk to, your children. Just listen to someone for like 5 minutes without interrupting them. If you can do that, try to listen to them for 5 minutes without interrupting. And then I want you guys to see if you can identify what needs come up for them. See if you can identify what needs are coming up. See if you can identify what's happening for them. And be patient. Try to de-escalate. If your goal is to connect, if this is somebody you love and respect or want in your life, try to find a way to connect with them, even if they're upset at you. Yeah, you might be right. But do you want to be right or stay in connection? You be right and be alone. Right? So make sure that you guys are connecting. I posted the link in the chat for the Center for Nonviolent Communication. They have the list of human needs. You can just Google basic human needs. There's another one for the hierarchy of needs, all kinds of shit. So reference that and see if you can identify the things that you're hearing from people. I guarantee you it'll give you more patience. And if you want people to do it for you, tell them to listen to you and see if they can identify what needs are coming up for you, just so you can know what that even feels like to have someone do that for you. You'd be surprised how good that feels. I do exercise where we practice this in my class. So for 5 minutes, someone talks. For 5 minutes, the other person listens. And the person that's listening is looking at the list and identifying what needs are coming up for the person that's talking. And then after that 5 minutes is up, they spend 2 minutes talking about that. And the person that was getting their needs identified, you'd be surprised how happy they get. Like it's like the feeling, oh my God, somebody who gets it. Now, you don't tell them that's what they need. You ask them. You say, it sounds like you have a need for some stability, or you sound like you have a need for, use whatever wording works for you in your relationship. If you're talking to a child, probably don't want to say stability, right? You might want to say you don't feel safe, right? You want to feel safe. So that's it. Thank you all. Have a great night. I appreciate you all.